Hello and welcome to another presentation from qualityInspection.org. In this presentation, we're going to answer the question, what does CMT, cut, make and trim, mean? It's an introduction to important concepts for importers who buy sewn products from Asia, especially when it comes to your apparel manufacturing requirements. So let's define what CMT is. It stands for cut, make and trim, and this is where an apparel factory takes your designs and produces them following three stages. Cut, where the material is cut to your pattern and made ready to sew. Make, where the garments are sewn together and created. And trim, where the garments are finished, any threads and small imperfections are removed, and final QC and packing occurs. And let's look at developing your new garments too. Usually in China, we don't allow a Chinese manufacturer to completely develop a new piece of hardware. For example, this could be an electronic device. Loads can go wrong. Perhaps they might eventually retain the ownership of the design, register your IP for themselves. They might make changes to your product that suit them, but certainly not your needs, and more besides. But when we're purchasing garments from China or Vietnam, actually it's advisable to let the manufacturer handle development of samples. They've often got dedicated facilities just for this. The problem is, if you do send them paper patterns and detailed methods of production, they're probably just going to modify them without telling you. So a smoother way to do it is to get samples that they've made in a way that's comfortable for them, because you can keep rejecting these until the result's fine for everyone. What's the worst case scenario? Well, if you switch to another manufacturer, they might not be able to find exactly the same fabrics or accessories, but they can probably find something that's extremely similar. A quick overview of the steps of garment production. We can usually organize suppliers in three ways. First of all, we've got those that provide finished product sourcing. So these guys are actually middlemen, and they'll take your order and give it to a factory or more than one factory that they know under FOB terms. A lot of importers wonder what value this provides. To be fair, these middlemen might have really good relationships with great factories and can get the job done very, very well. But of course, they're going to be charging a markup in comparison to going direct to the manufacturer. 2, in-house production. So the factory gets an order and makes the goods in-house in its own workshop. When buying direct from a manufacturer, most buyers expect this to happen. It's kind of the gold standard, but actually, quite often, this is not what happens. What happens is that the supplier goes down the outsourced CMT purchasing route, and they keep development of the new styles and obtaining raw materials under their control, but they outsource the labor-intensive jobs. So that's cut and make, sew and trim, the final QC and packing. Why? To reduce overall costs. It's pretty common. Probably around 25% of garment production in China is managed under CMT terms. So if we're now ready to produce a batch of garments, what are the steps? You'll see them below, and also the red ones are usually outsourced. So first of all, samples are made to match your design and get your order. The patterns designed in the sampling phase are used for consumption calculations and pricing. The fabrics, accessories, and packing elements are purchased. And now we come on to potentially outsourced elements. So the fabric is cut and then bundled by style, size, and color. The different sewing steps are performed in a workshop. And then the finished products are trimmed, QC checked, and packed for shipment. So the question is, why are certain steps kept in-house when others aren't in the CMT purchasing model? Well, suppliers want to keep control of development and purchasing. For example, when they're making patterns and samples, these are really critical for getting orders. If these go wrong, they won't get the order. Setting up a small sampling room with a few good technicians is enough to produce excellent samples based on your designs. What's more, if they're confident that they can produce these samples, then they'll also be confident that they can produce them in mass production too. Also, the purchasing of materials. Of course, the raw materials are one of the key expenses for suppliers. So once they've got the patterns and designs down, they're able to calculate the consumption and purchase the materials. So let's look at why cut is subcontracted usually. Well, you can see a technician cutting here. It requires a lot of room, some specialized equipment, and quite a number of experienced technicians. All of this requires quite an investment on the supplier's part. However, if it is managed properly, there are benefits to keeping it in-house. In fact, there are 3 benefits. So first of all, the fabrics and accessories can be controlled as soon as they're received and before they're cut. Whereas if a third party is receiving the raw materials, maybe they won't check them for defects as thoroughly. After all, why should they care? They're being paid to do a job, which is to get the materials, cut them, and make them ready for sewing. Secondly, unused fabric is always kept aside. But if a third party is doing this, how do you know if they're declaring how much has been retained or if they're declaring correct figures? The leftover fabric is worth something. That's where a lot of profit's made. So if a lot of unused fabric is never declared by the workshop, this is likely to drive the prices up for your supplier and in turn for you. Thirdly, if automatic cutting equipment is invested in, actually it's going to reduce that fabric consumption and the payback period might be less than a year. Of course, if this is outsourced to a third party, your supplier probably has very little say in whether they would invest in this kind of equipment. Perhaps they're going to continue to do things in an old-fashioned way, which is less efficient and leads to more fabric wastage. Here's why make is subcontracted. So this is one of the activities which is always subcontracted under CMT terms. And make is where we're sewing the garments together. So operating a workshop is a recurring cost for a fixed capacity. If it's outsourced, it effectively means that production capacity is unlimited. It also means that your supplier is able to tout around the job between different workshops and find out which one can provide the cheapest possible service. And here's trim. So trimming usually includes final QC and packing, but it also includes a check of each garment where little threads and imperfections are trimmed away using the clippers that you can see in the image there. It makes sense that the workshop who has sewn the garments together would also conduct this in the same facility. If quality inspections are performed during the make step, hopefully by this time there won't be any quality disasters anyway, even if they don't do an amazing job of final QC. We've spoken about some of the benefits of outsourcing CMT, certainly from a perspective of cost, but there are risks too. The main downside is that the sewing workshop is the weakest element of the network. And that's because it's replaced quite easily. So they know that they're expendable. Does this prompt them to invest a lot of time, effort, and care into each project? They have to bid a low price to get business. So they'll be rushing production to make a small profit in order to move on to the next job. And in China, about 99% of garment factories have pretty much the same organization. And they're all in a kind of race to the bottom when it comes to costs, which can only be achieved with unskilled labor, long hours, and minimal QC. Those 3 things alone are exactly what you as a garment buyer don't want. In fact, perhaps we should be rethinking the sewing workshop's role in all of this completely. Really, it should be at the center of the supply chain. After all, where do most quality problems come from? They come from the sewing workshop where the garments are being made. Where do delays come from? Again, from the workshop. Perhaps their low-skilled employees just aren't doing a good job, leading to a lot of rework or quality issues. Maybe they're rushing orders for several customers and yours gets bumped down. You know, a lot of these aspects come from a less professional outfit, of course, because they don't concentrate on planning and things like that. Okay, so let's wrap up the presentation now that we know the benefits and drawbacks of CMT. So CMT stands for cut, make, and trim. Cutting is where the material is prepared, making is where garments are sewn together, and trimming is where they're finished. Unlike other industries, it's recommended to let the garment manufacturer develop your samples because then it's more likely to have an outcome that everybody's happy with. There are three common ways that garment suppliers can be organized. So we've got middlemen who source the finished products based on your needs. We've got in-house production where everything occurs in one company's facility or facilities. And then we've got CMT purchasing, which is where a lot of the labor-intensive tasks are outsourced. A lot of large or classy suppliers often purchase the raw materials themselves, but then outsource to other factories to do the cutting and the sewing. So this is the outsourced CMT model that we've been discussing. By purchasing the raw materials themselves, this really helps to keep a good control over quality. And subcontracting CMT can reduce costs, but you need to be aware of drawbacks such as rush production, an unskilled workforce being used, not enough QC happening. All of these things can have corporate social responsibility consequences for your brand. And that brings us to the end of what does CMT, cut, make, and trim mean? Now, just quickly, if you do need help with your own quality inspections, Southeast are here to help in China and Southeast Asia. You can have a look at some of the common inspections there. And don't miss any blog posts and resources from all of our companies. So you've got our blog here on qualityinspection.org, but also the blog over on Southeast and Southeast's resource library, which has got loads of great ebooks and other free resources for importers like you. And finally, the Sing Control blog as well. If you've enjoyed this video, please like and share. If you've got any questions, don't hesitate to come back to us over on qualityinspection.org by contacting us. Thanks for being on board. We will catch you for the next presentation.